We're here at the C20, all about putting people at the centre of big global decision-making on an economic front. Why is it so important that people are at the heart of the whole process?
Well, of course they are at the heart, and I think it's very encouraging that under the Australian government's presidency of this G20, they've actually encouraged this engagement by civil society through the C20. All these numbers and so on are all a bit confusing, but the key point is that the G20 understands that you have to engage with civil society. The reality is that modern governments cannot achieve their objectives without working with the enormous range of groups represented by civil society.
Do you feel like government is listening in Australia and globally?
I think government is listening. And we have many politicians who are leaders who have to go back to their constituents, and those constituents are demanding that the broader social justice and environment concerns, sustainability concerns are represented in decisions. And my own experience of government, cabinet ministers, representatives, is that they're increasingly aware that they've got to go back to civil society and justify why they've done things in particular ways. And I think that is why why it's so good to see civil society playing an engagement with this rather grand concept of a group of 20 that actually engages about 50% of the world's population.
Of course, having the G20 in Australia is an immense responsibility and an immense opportunity. From a human rights perspective, domestically and globally, what do you hope to see addressed in this process?
I would particularly, from the perspective of the Australian Human Rights Commission, like to see human rights as legal obligations integrated into the agenda. Now, to be more specific, it's quite clear that the entities in society that are actually going to breach your human rights, most particularly, are in the business community. It's jobs, it's opportunity, it's education, delivery of goods and services. And therefore, we very much see the future as being one in which core human rights can be met by working collaboratively with business and obviously with government. And so I think that one of the great outcomes I can see would be some form of agreement by the G20 leaders that achieving human rights outcomes through an engagement of business, government and civil society is an important part of their agenda.
Now, the C20 Summit here in Australia, an incredible event bringing together civil society from around the world. But following on from this year, why is the C20 such an important part of global decision-making for the years ahead?
Well, I think you have to think about practicalities, and the G20 does represent an enormously powerful economic and political grouping. And for that group to engage with C20 globally does give C20 an opportunity that is much more direct than can necessarily be achieved through the UN system. Now, as an international lawyer, I've supported and want to support the UN system. It's obviously vital, but I do know that it's cumbersome, it's slow, it's very difficult. And to see this other avenue through the G20 and those political leaders in a much more direct relationship between civil society and those global leaders in G20, I think means that you could possibly move faster and more coherently towards those goals. And so that obviously one's going to look at every way in which you can achieve these outcomes. And I think the G20, and now linked with civil society, can be a way of achieving that.
So the C20 is perhaps a more agile way for governments around the world to engage with civil society.
This is only the second of the C20 meetings, and we have a long way to go. But I think that if we can learn to work with government leaders to encourage them to identify with the objectives of civil society. And of course, where they are representatives of democratic governments, they need to anyway. I mean, they understand that process. But I think you're right in that this is a direct, much more agile and probably effective way of integrating economic policy and global financial needs with the social justice outcomes that, in fact, as you have said, engage with the reality that we're talking about people and the human condition and social justice, not about theories of financial crises.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.